recorded for this session. We also, I was expecting to have someone from DUG here to go over these intro slides, and they are not here yet. So,
we could also come back if you wanted to.
That's what I'm thinking we might do. Yeah. I think we'll start with the content and move on from there. So what are we talking about today? We're talking about data-driven marketing for Dynamics CE CRM users. I'm super excited to be joined by, I should say, Jessica Best, and I forgot to put our names on the slide, Jess. I just am realizing that.
I'm the Jessica one and she's the Monica one.
Yes. Thank you all for joining. I'm going to ask everybody to mute themselves so that you can hear the presenters. So I'm Monica Hoyer. I'm the marketing director at emfluence. Emfluence is a marketing automation platform that syncs with Dynamics and Power Platform applications. Jess, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, Jessica Best. I actually, as Monica said a little bit earlier, if you were on, I am an alum of emfluence and a user. Just recently have been working on Winnebago for an agency campaign under the Barkley flag. I was at an agency called Barkley here in Kansas City until late last year. And then as of January, I have my own little baby company doing just email marketing and CRM strategy consulting under the flag Better Ave. So a better path together, as it were. So
nice. Well, I'm super excited about this presentation. You and I have been talking about data for quite a while now. So we're going to just jump right into it. So just to give everybody an overview of what we're going to be talking about today, we're going to talk through 3 steps of putting data to work for you. And I know as marketers, we're always really concerned about data and what data can we use and what data we're using and can we gather more data and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to start off with data that makes a difference, and then we're going to walk you through kind of where to look for that data, identifying the data that you have and putting it to use for you, and then prioritizing where to have it. We're going to really just talk for maybe 15-20 minutes, and then we're going to open the floor up to everybody else. So because I know marketers like to ask questions, and we want to make sure that we have a lot of time for questions. So jumping right in here, Jess, I'm going to shoot this over to you.
Yeah, so this is I think a perfect example. As we're talking about what data makes a difference, the first thing that comes to my mind is this lead nurture example from Winnebago. And Winnebago uses the emfluence platform partially because they've moved out of this entry-level platform that they were using before, where they couldn't do anything really data-driven. I mean, they like, hello, first name. Okay, check, got it. But this campaign actually was one of the first things we turned on when we had deeper capabilities. And by the way, this is this is not the magic sauce. Like, this is a lead nurture campaign. I hope you guys are all doing some sort of lead nurture campaign. But for Winnebago, we found that in the last fiscal year, this campaign could be tied to $50 million in sales. So sometimes the simple things, when they're really data-driven and really well done, can be the things that turn out to be some of our bigger impact opportunities. This is a 4-part email series that goes to somebody that downloaded a brochure on the Winnebago website and immediately sends them the brochure. That's what this first email on the left does, but then spaces out a little bit of the what next, right? You downloaded the brochure. Do you want to look at some of the inside features? Would you be interested in this other vehicle that other people like you are also looking at? And then the 4th email is really just a call to action. Come in and take a drive. You got to get in it. You got to come look at it, right? So in other words, what data made this successful? And Monica, if you'll hit that next slide for me. This is data that drives the timing of the email, meaning when somebody downloads an information brochure about a $400,000 vehicle, we're going to talk to them about it. We're going to send them something immediately. And then we're going to space it days and weeks apart, sort of according to our customer's natural flow or journey in the decision-making process. But data also determined the timing of the content of the email, not the least of which is you were looking at this vehicle. I'm going to start by talking to you about this vehicle. And then the pieces of that vehicle or the things that we've identified that buyers of that vehicle, perhaps called personas, would be most interested in. So what we talk about on a smaller off-road vehicle isn't even the same category of stuff that we're talking about for those big tour bus sized RVs. And data informed the analysis that went into the content for this campaign. We also took a look at, if you're looking at vehicle A, what is the other most likely option you're potentially shopping for? This helps us cover our bases. If you were not sold on email 1 and 2 yet on this vehicle, maybe it's because you're still deciding. Maybe it's because you're still comparing models or comparing brands. And what we really want is to be part of that conversation with you. So we did an analysis, a propensity analysis for those people who like A, they might also like B. And of course, that $50 million number is our favorite part of the campaign. And that was entirely data, CRM data driven as well. For those people who received, opened, or clicked the email, or opened or clicked one of the emails in the nurture series for a vehicle, and then went on to purchase that exact vehicle within 30 days, we gave the nurture series a point, right? We gave them partial credit or attribution for that campaign. Now, caveat, that's not like the email didn't make them buy the vehicle. They were probably shopping for the vehicle, and the email is part of what contributed to closing that sale. But it is an attributed number. It is sort of a partially attributed number. And even if it were only fractionally true, it was still a wild ROI. So
that is insane.
Yeah, right. It's crazy. And not everybody sells $400,000 vehicles, but I think especially in long lead time sales, B2B sales, like I think it's a pretty interesting idea that if you could impact that by even 5%, gosh, it really makes a lot of sense. So overall, the data that makes a difference, the data that drives relevance and therefore response rate is timing data. And that could be that just immediate versus delay. It could also be whether or not to send to somebody. Somebody is actively shopping for this vehicle. Maybe we don't send them information about other vehicles. And then data that determines the content or an analyzed content, what should go in that, how many emails should we send, when should we send them based on what that shopper journey looks like. All that's data, all that's our data. And then data that drives the attribution or kind of determines the impact of our campaigns. Those are the 4 big areas that I would say data can really drive impact in your campaigns.
And Jess, this wasn't just shooting in the dark. You had some of this data ahead of time and you just really kind of rolled up your sleeves and dug into it. Is that correct?
That's it. I mean, truly, we had all this. We didn't guess on any of this. I mean, a little bit on the timing, I guess, because we're learning the customer journey as we see engagement through the email build. But the timing of the email, like we're using data across the industry that says if we don't follow up within 5 minutes, somebody else is gonna. So that first email goes out immediately. Or the content of the email, we're doing a lookalike analysis. So if somebody is shopping for this vehicle, we literally ran an analysis on our entire database. If they bought this, what else were they shopping on before they bought this? Or what do they buy next? Or those types of things. So we could do that propensity analysis before we even turned it on. I mean, the truth is, if we'd done anything, it would have worked better than doing nothing because they weren't nurturing these leads before. Right. But we really took that first big step doing all 4 kinds of data.
Yeah. And I think the other thing to note is that this content that you used wasn't new content. It was stuff that was already existing. So you're not reinventing the wheel. You're not having to go to a copywriter. You have all of it. You're just putting it into a different format, which is super helpful too.
Actually, I think that the client was a little nervous about how much work this would be, how much lift this would be. These emails are long and juicy. And I think once they realized it's really a curation exercise, right? All of this information is on the webpage that person was on, but we're trying to almost support them in their decision-making process by pointing out to them the different places on the website, deeper dives or photo features, those types of things. Like we're taking them back to the website time and time again to try and help keep them going down the funnel themselves. So it's really not that we're writing a lot of new content. We did write obviously subject lines and kind of a headline section. But other than that, it was really a curation exercise, which thank goodness, because otherwise we now have 10 of these live and it would have been a heck of an exercise to get it done.
Yes.
It still was, but even more so if we had to write all of the why you should consider a Class B vehicle content. Like that's all stuff they had.
Right. That's fantastic. So the next step in this process, and it's not even a step, it's just really understanding that you have to find the data in order for it to be able to be useful for you. And so at Emfluence, we talk a lot about customer journey. And when you do a customer journey map and you start from the beginning and you find your sources, and then you start to really identify what content people are consuming and at what point in the stage, what after consuming X number of pieces of content, they then convert. So really taking the entire journey, everything that everyone is looking at, and then doing an analysis on that and figuring out what's that tipping point. Where are people then converting as a result of all of this nurturing that you're doing? And when you're doing that process, you start to identify those gaps in your content or gaps in your conversation with these prospects. And that allows you to then fill in those gaps and identify where that happens and what's going on and maybe who can fill those gaps. So I think it's really important to note here that it's not always up to marketing to fill those gaps. And Jess, you and I have been in marketing for so long that we know a lot of the time we take it on ourselves and we say, I'm going to fill this gap. I'm going to figure out how to make this work for me. But the reality is that the sales team can help because some of that data is already in their heads. They just have to put it into CRM or into whatever single source of truth that you guys are using, which we're going to talk about next. Your customer success team can help you out. You can go to a third party and do overlays on zip codes and port that data into your CRM. So it's really not just up to marketing to do a lot of this stuff, but make sure you're identifying someone within the organization who can do it and really tap into all those resources and all those relationships that you've built within your organization, because none of us have to do it ourselves. And then, Jess, you and I have talked about first party data and zero party data a lot. We love our first party data. I think earlier today we were talking and saying, you know, we don't know how long some of these social media platforms are going to be around. If anybody in the audience remembers what was before Facebook, it was
MySpace.
MySpace. Thank you so much. MySpace is no longer around.
I feel like there were a couple in the old days.
Yes, exactly. That was a long time ago. For those of you who have as much gray hair as I do, you might remember it. And so, you know, we don't know how long any of these companies are going to be around. Bed Bath & Beyond just filed for bankruptcy and is shutting down all their stores. These things happen. The industry is constantly changing, constantly moving. You know, we're seeing it in all of our friends probably getting laid off and things like that. I don't want to bring this conversation down, but really owning that data and asking your customers and your prospects for the information up front. If you want to do a birthday campaign, make sure you capture that information. If you want to do a regional campaign, make sure you're capturing that that zip code or the state at least. So there's a lot of information that you can capture on the beginning part of their journey that will help you throughout the entire process of nurturing those folks. And Jess, I know you've done a lot of work around zero party data. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, so I love this phrase, right? Because it's really like, as marketers, we've been calling this first party data forever. But Forrester a few years ago started defining first or zero party data just a little bit differently. Zero party data is data that the user or customer or client gave you, as in no guessing, no algorithm, no secret forms, no tracking cookies. Like, they told you they have a dog named Blue. So when you talk to Blue, they're not creeped out. They literally told you that information. So zero party data, I think, goes hand in hand with the changes that we're seeing in privacy and permission and access to data. And I really like that model. I like the idea of just asking. To your point, if you want to send a birthday campaign, ask for someone's birthday. Now, don't just collect everything, right? We all know that the longer the form is, or the more we're asking, the less we get. But if you have a use case for it, especially something that's really powerful, like a lead nurture campaign, ask for what you need to make that lead nurture campaign work. And then if they tell you, I'm shopping for I keep going back to the Winnebago example, I'm shopping for an off-road camper van. Great. I'm literally going to send you more information about that. Thank you for letting me be more relevant to you. So it's almost an agreement in the transactional nature of a relationship. I'm telling you what I need so that you can be more relevant to me. And then when you use that information, not only is it not shocking or creepy or like, I wonder who told them this, I'm doing what you asked me to do, right? I'm using the data that you gave me to make what I send you more relevant and to not send to you when it's not relevant, which is kind of nice.
Right. Yeah. And as consumers ourselves, I think we can all relate to that when you receive something that's completely different than anything you've ever even looked at a store. It's a little frustrating. So having that first party or zero party data is super essential in this data discussion. And then finally, go ahead.
Sorry, Monica, just to go back really quickly, I want to just point out another use case on that Winnebago example, because when you're talking about identifying gaps and how like the marketing team maybe isn't even the person to fill those gaps, I actually think that's right more often than not. Like I think it's that way more often than it's our job to fill those gaps, especially in, again, like a sales organization. The sales team has to be the one to fill in that data, especially on like a contract level. So for Winnebago, we talk about that attributed number, like anybody who was in the nurture series that then went on to buy. If the salesperson at the dealership doesn't capture that person's email address or doesn't capture it correctly, we don't have a match. So one of the gaps they had was they really weren't incentivizing the sales team to even collect that, let alone get it right. And that's one of the processes that we had to change in order to truly understand the impact of this campaign, because they weren't taught to care yet. And so it turned out that it was actually a whole process change that needed to happen to make sure that those gaps could be filled by the team that was on the ground, the team that was really facing the customer.
Yeah, and you make a good point there, Jess. And you said that it's a whole process change. I think that what's really important to note here is that when you're starting to do a customer journey exercise, which will unveil a lot of data and you'll be looking at a lot of data in that process, the information is essential. Some of the essential information can be captured by other people. And if they're not on board with what you're trying to do and understand what you're trying to do, it's going to be harder for you to get that information or have them change their process in order to capture that information for you. And so making sure that everybody is speaking the same language and understanding the benefit to it is also part of that process.
Yeah.
So, so finally, where does this information live? And quite honestly, there's no right answer. The right answer is somewhere that everyone agrees it should live. And just want to make sure that that marketing team is part of that discussion. So captured here on this slide, we talk about maybe potentially it lives in your CRM. And for most of you on this call, it's probably Dynamics. Your marketing automation platform could also house it, or a customer data platform. And those are all places where this information could live. And again, it just goes back to making sure everyone knows where it lives and everyone's on the same page with, this is our sense of truth. This is our place of truth. I think you had a really good term for it earlier today, Jess. Your golden rule, was it?
Yeah, what is your golden record? Like, what is the thing that's true and everybody can look to it because it's true? Even if, to your point, the marketing team really only ever touches the marketing platform, we shouldn't be filling in gaps of data in the marketing platform, right? That should all come from probably at least a CRM, if not a CDP. That needs to be the golden record. And then we are just an echo or a mirror of that. Yeah. So that, if there's a change that needs to be made, if something's wrong in our system, we have to remember not to learn to fix that in our system, to make that. The only thing that really comes from the marketing platform is preferences, right? An opt-out needs to go from the marketing platform back to the CRM or whatever, but everything else really needs to be handled or changed on that master record or that golden record.
Yeah, and just make sure that you're including other teams that you want as part of this process in whatever it is your master record or that golden ticket.
Yes,
I love
that.
That's
right.
So is there anything else you want to add at this point? I did see that Liz jumped on here, and I want to make sure that she has an opportunity to talk about DUG. And since we skipped over that part and went right to content, and then we'll take some questions also.
Sounds good.
Liz?
Oh,
Are
you're so
you
sweet.
here?
I was not
There you
expecting.
are.
Hi,
Hello.
everybody. I'm so sorry. I got held up on another call. Thank you for
No worries. No worries. No worries.
awesome. Wonderful presentation. Thanks for
Thank
letting
you.
me insert myself here towards the middle of the call. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Liz Hallen. I'm with Dynamics User Group, and normally I would be here at the beginning to welcome all of you. So I apologize again profusely. But I did just want to mention quickly about a little bit about DUG in case you've not heard of DUG, which is short for Dynamics User Group. We are a free community and resource, and you are participating in just one of the 6 programs that we offer, which is one of our DUG Meetups. We've been around for a long time, but really have been more active and more engaged with our full-time team for about the past 3 years. And in the past 3 years, we've grown to almost 40,000 members, which is really awesome. Our membership is free. It's open to any end user, customer, partner, implementer, all of you on this call. If you haven't joined, please take a peek at dynamicsusergroup.com. And then as far as just some of the other programs that we offer, we're true believers in offering free education and content for everyone in our community. And so that's one of our strong pillars, I guess you could say. And many of you may know us more well known as for the hosts of the DynamicsCon event. We still host the virtual and the in-person event, DynamicsCon. We still have our online discussions forum, which is where we started. Obviously, meetups, we now have 35 meetup groups across 8 countries. So really excited about that amazing growth. And for another free education resource is our YouTube channel. We just posted up there a week and a half ago or so, our latest round of educational content, which came from our DynamicsCon virtual event. And then we do have a Team Up partner membership program, which is one of the ways that we help to pay for our overhead. And this is for partners in our space for an annual membership program. But for our end users, it's also a really great way to get your services and solutions in front of the whole community.
Very
In
cool.
terms, yeah. Our next
Yay!
big event, yes, it's on my background as well. DynamicsCon Live is coming up May 22nd to the 25th, and we'll be going to Scottsdale, Arizona this year. Yay, I know. I see a few names on here, people that will be here, and we would be super excited to have you join. Our prices are increasing on May 1st. So if you are thinking about registering, now would be the time to do it because you're going to save yourself some money. And I do have a coupon code here for you too for an additional $50 off. And in addition to DynamicsCon Live, which is meant to be more of the end user customer focused type content, I'm very happy that we have added a new program that's specifically for marketers such as yourselves called the Partner Marketing Event. And our lovely hosts today, Monica and Kelly and Sarah and Rick McCutcheon with Partner Talks and Adam with MS Dynamics World all came together to provide this fantastic program. It will be on May 25th, so the last day of DynamicsCon. There is a separate registration charge for it, but there's going to be some really excellent marketing content, a lot of things that you've been hearing in this DUG meetup. We'll have a full day of content for all of you to join. We are getting close to capacity on that event. So if you're thinking about registering, make sure that you do so very, very soon. I think we've got about 10 seats left. So,
Oh, it's getting tight.
it's getting
I'm
tight.
excited.
It's meant to be a smaller group. That's so that all of you can have wonderful, engaging conversations and really, use that time to learn from each other. So thank you
Yeah,
for
it's gonna
letting
be
me talk
awesome.
about DUG and DynamicsCon
For
and Partner
sure.
Marketing Event. Rick, was
Anytime.
there anything that I missed on PME that you wanted to also mention?
Yes, we've got Microsoft coming to do the keynote, and what we're asking Microsoft to do is really, can you come back with some data around how our customers are buying today and how that's changing? Because we're seeing, I think, a lot of changes. Now that we're moving to the cloud, they're buying more apps, they're buying them at different stages, and projects aren't being done we make this big investment, put something on premise and try to build it out over a year period. I think, they move to the cloud and then they just start to expand their usage and what they do. And I think that's really starting to affect the way both the SI marketers and the ISV marketers have to engage with the customers. There's also some stuff that I'm going to cover. I'm looking at some recent studies from G2 and Gartner around the customer buying process around software, and there's some really interesting things that are coming out of those reports, along with MS Dynamics World's annual survey to do with the customers buying, how they want to buy software. So I think this will be really in-depth conversation, and we're all in this dynamics world. So I think it'll be very precise to what we need to do going into the next couple of years.
Fantastic. And Kelly posted both the link to DynamicsCon Live and the partner marketing event in the chat. So if you're interested in that, now the commercial is over, and we would love to hear from folks questions about data and marketing while Jess and I are still here on the conversation. So raise your hand, put your question in the chat, however you would like to do it. It looks like Kelly's also come on, but Sarah raised her hand. Why don't we start with you, Sarah?
Well, first of all, thank you guys for that. That was extremely informative. And I have a really big question because you guys used the use case for Winnebago. That's actually one of our customers that we just got up live. So I feel like that's a use case waiting to happen. So I'm curious then from the data standpoint of when you're putting those, we all work with different types of marketing software that does, a point system. And I've been in situations where people complain about the point system. Do you guys feel that emfluence is really hitting it on the nail when it comes to, understanding, especially like you said with the data privacy of getting that really good ROI?
So a point system like a lead scoring or contact scoring, is that what you're talking about specifically? Yeah. So Jess, do you want to address that in terms of Winnebago?
No, we're not using it. So we ended up taking the data from, again, we're kind of using that zero party data rather than calculated data. If you were on the site in the last 14 days or if the website gets you back to the site from a lead nurture perspective and you become a contact dealer lead, we take you out of that and move. So we use behavioral triggers to move everybody through, as opposed to like how hot or warm or how hot or cool they were. But I love the lead scoring system that's built in. Monica, do you want to share a little on that?
Yeah, our lead scoring system is pretty robust in terms of lead scoring systems. I haven't found one that allows you to do as much as the emfluence one does. It really allows customers to, or you as the user, to program what you want to look at from a lead scoring model. So do you want to look at it over the past year because your sales cycle is so long? Maybe you want to look at it on the last 30 days and over the last year, so you can have multiple models. I think what's to me important is making sure that as much as you're doing the analysis from an AI perspective, you want to make sure there's still that human touch involved, whether it's coming from the salesperson or you're doing dynamic content based on their behavior within your website, interacting with your brand, either online or offline. So making sure that you're capturing everything possible within whatever lead scoring model you use or whatever lead scoring models you use. So we can't rely 100% on just numbers and data. We do need to make sure that we're capturing some of that that organic stuff in those conversations along the same lines. Does that answer your question, Sarah?
Yeah, no, I love this. Yeah.
I would just say, since Monica doesn't get to brag on herself as easily as I can, I will just say I also love that lead scoring model. I think a lot of platforms have either a always goes up type of, not like a lifetime lead score, or they use a subtraction model. So okay, but then after 6 months take away. And I think the thing that's really graceful about the way that Emfluences does it is that you can basically set your window. Yes, I care about their lifetime value, but I actually just want to know if in the last 30 days they're really hot. So that you kind of have the ability to make that calculation in the time frame that makes sense for you.
Yeah, no, I really like this because even when we were like we actually use Winnebago a lot for ourselves for a use case because and I like how you brought up like the how we really pride ourselves on like the whole like the customization that they do, but you guys are able to, let's say you're working with a really great B2B website, you guys can take those customization behaviors and even just like really just understand the data being driven through that, which I think is really impressive.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
If I can just comment too, if anybody has looked at Viva Sales yet, so the stuff that Microsoft's doing around AI and being able to read conversations, I guess this will be all integrated through Teams soon. They'll be able to take all of this to the next level because we'll be able to say, okay, what's your scoring model? How did these sales reps, there's going to be a scoring model for the lead and then a scoring model actually for the salesperson. Say, how did they do on the sales call? Because the technology is going to be able to say, did this customer reach this point, right?
Mhm.
Did we have this conversation? Did we cover these items? What's the next step? That's all going to be measurable soon, which is going to be really, really interesting. And I've done some work with Congruent X right now. We've got another webinar coming up with MS Dynamics World on this because they're doing a lot of deep dive research and building applications around this. So I think this whole scoring thing is going to be, taken to the next level with AI.
Yeah.
interesting.
Awesome. Thanks, Rick. Kelly, you've got your hand up.
Yeah. Hi, Jessica. I loved the Winnebago example. Thank you for,
Sure.
unfolding a real life example for us to look at. So my question is, for those of us that are B2B marketers, what kind of personalization would you take advantage of?
Yeah, it's a totally fair question. And I was like, okay, so like I'm talking to CRM folks, but I think because this is such a sales example, like this is an 18-month sales. This is my B2B example because it's an 18-month sales cycle. It functions in a lot of the same ways with the same breakdown between the sales team and the marketing team. So I think a lot of the, like, especially the categorization of what kind of data matters still plays for B2B. How fast can you get something out the door to them? And marketing's your buddy here, right? Like salesperson, you're going to try and call that person within 5 minutes. We're going to try and beat that for you. We're going to try and either meet or match or beat that for you because we want to make sure that something is going out the door in that precious window of time. And that was kind of like when I was back in B2B sales, we were like, okay, you have to call them within an hour, like double points if you can get to them in 5 minutes. But then also being able to systematically speak to them about the thing that they were most interested in. So there's two sides to that. There's what goes on the email, and then there's also what shows up on the page in the CRM. So being able to mirror that so that whatever hit their inbox, you, the salesperson, are also seeing that that's their preference or what their next best product recommendation might look like. And that's maybe just the difference between a Winnebago type example and a B2B example is being able to turn the camera back around and say, yep, the email platform's got us in our recommendation model. Does the CRM have a view of that same data, that next best product recommendation for that person? And that's a perfect example of what Monica was talking about of don't make your email platform the golden record. Don't put information there that you can't also put back in your sort of master data hub because it's a much more holistic experience, especially for sales. So good question.
Yep.
I know this is like a B2C example and I'm like, oh man, but I do think it's a good corollary. I think a lot of those same things still play.
Well, and Jess, you and I have also talked about like what's the difference between B2B versus B2C, and everybody defines it differently. And I think that's what's really important here is that you can look at Winnebago as a B2C because they're somebody who actually sells directly to consumers. But the other thing to think about is that somebody has to physically go in and actually sit down and sign a contract in order for it to be a thing. And so there is still emotion involved in the buying process, which maybe isn't present in the B2B buying process. But it does still require you to talk to somebody. It's not something you can just do automatically online and have the Winnebago show up in your driveway as much as some of us might want that.
I know. I'm sure Winnebago is working on that behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean,
deliver it to your house or something.
Yeah.
No, I think that's exactly right, because it depends on how you're defining it. I think I may be at risk of thinking of B2B as being personal selling, right? But that's not even true. There are B2B softwares that you sign up, like e-commerce, like you literally go on and you put your credit card in. So yeah, it depends on how you're defining it. I was thinking that if you think about it, I actually went to a conference where a gal was talking about personas and how you only need as many personas as you have different ways or reasons people buy. And I was like, oh, that's a really good way to not have like 25 personas. I really like that. But then also that the path of a long sales cycle is really what she was defining as B2B, meaning when we talk about the differences between B2B and B2C, if it's e-commerce and it's immediate and you put your credit card in, it looks like a B2C, it looks like e-commerce, right? But if you have an 18-month long cycle where you have to keep a relationship warm, you have to combat what's the word?
Objectives.
Objections. Oh my gosh. Where you have to combat objections. Thank you. Good grief. It just flew out of my brain. Where you have to combat somebody's objections in real time, or marketing has to support you in that, then it really starts to look like it's that long lead sales cycle. And that to me is, I think, its own beast. That's where it's like, oh, good for you. You sold, widgets online. You sold bubblegum online at $2 a pop. Okay. How am I going to use that to sell gutters to corporate builders? It just doesn't feel like there's a corollary. But when it's a good, juicy sales cycle that there's, 20 plus touch points and there's a long lead time in it, that's when it starts to look more similar to me.
Yeah, I agree. Anybody else on the call have some questions? You can raise your hand. You can throw them in the chat. Either way, we are open and willing to answer more questions here.
We answered all the questions that there was.
We answered all the questions.
Does anybody else have an example that they would share, or like a piece of data that absolutely changed the track or the trajectory of one of their campaigns? Oh, Rick
might not. He has his hand up.
Yeah. Yes. So I'd like to hear from the audience to say, are any people using any third-party data supplement data cleanup tools? Like I use DemandBase, which used to be called our Inside View product, and it does a fantastic job of new data I'm bringing into CRM, updating it and cleaning it, adding contacts to it, which I find one of the easiest ways to make sure that I actually put all the data in, because I don't have to do it then. I could just click a few buttons, DemandBase finds the company and brings it forward, and I say, okay, yes, and then it goes right into my CRM system. So is anybody else using any of those tools? I know there's 3 or 4 different companies that are producing them now.
So I've never used I don't think I've used DemandBase myself, but in the email realm, there are quite a few different products out there that will clean your email list for you and tell you which ones are potential spam traps and which ones maybe aren't in circulation anymore and things like that. So there are a lot of those types of companies out there that will help you clean that email list.
Also, has anybody figured out how to get their salespeople to fill out the CRM?
Yes,
I do teach courses in this, but just any real world examples.
I was gonna say I have one, but it's not a very popular solve.
Well, what we've done in some instances where part of their bonus is attached to how how much data they put into CRM and the quality of their data. Yeah. So that's always a bit controversial, but you know what? It actually works.
Yep, that's mine. We used to not, if you didn't put the deal as closed one in Salesforce or in Microsoft CRM, you didn't get paid.
Yeah, I've seen that too, where you block commissions if it's not updated. I mean,
how would we know if it's closed? Microsoft doesn't think it's closed. CRM doesn't think it's closed.
Right.
It's a little harsh, but it was very effective.
Well, we did everything up to that, where we trained them and we coached them and we mentored them and we asked them politely, and then went to their comp package and changed it, and it worked.
Yeah. Yeah. Funny.
Yes, incentives work. And Emily mentioned here in the chat that Never Bounce helped her clean email addresses at her last job. But as good marketers, we should never have bad email addresses. I agree with you. We shouldn't. However, when people leave organizations, sometimes the ISPs know that that person has left the organization or gets notified that the emails are no longer being read and they become spam filters. And so making sure that you're cleaning on a regular basis is never a bad rule of thumb, and they're not super expensive depending on the size of your list. You know, I think it's a penny an email address, or maybe a penny 100 email addresses. Not expensive for email list cleansing for sure.
And if I could just add to that, you know, I've been in a lot of meetings because, you know, for years as a CRM MVP, I got brought in when things weren't working well, usually. And, you know, I'm sitting in a room full of executives and we're saying, okay, you've got to go out and get a third-party cleaning tool and it's going to cost you $10,000 a year. And they're going, oh, we don't have a budget for that. And then I'd start to ask them, what do you think the data's worth? Right? What do you think your customer data is worth to your organization for support, cross-selling, upselling? Most companies, it's worth at least 7 figures, if not more. So for those people out there that are having a hard time getting people to invest in integrating the, you know, the CRM and the marketing automation tools into one data source, when you have them in 2 data sources, that data is pretty much worthless. But if you can, well, not worthless, but it's not as worth as much as if you can get into one data source, because every time you make a change on one side, it's making one piece of data incorrect. So that's what usually, you know, when I'm involved in a project, that's what we talk about, is what's the value of the data. And then if we look at all the AI tools, that all this Copilot stuff and Viva stuff that Microsoft's coming out with, unless your data is in good shape, you can't use it.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
So I think we're going to see massive data cleanup projects coming up in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
It's a really good frame up, actually, because I think that's like, especially from the sales side of an organization, sometimes they think in terms of what data costs to acquire. But if you're letting your data go bad, it's the same cost to reacquire. So if we think about what we're saving in keeping a good database instead of having to add to it because we ran out of names that were good, then I think that ends up being a really obvious investment. I mean, $10,000 compared to what's usually a lot more than $10,000.
And if that sales rep walks, or we walk the sales rep, what's the data walking out the door with that person worth?
Yeah.
You know, that usually easily covers the $10,000 a year.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh,
well,
sure.
and I think the Never Bounce maybe a little bit different, but I think, Monica, you and I have maybe worked with at Data or Fresh Address in the past. And it's like $15 1,000 to clean your list. Like, yeah, let's do that every so often.
Yeah, exactly.
But Emily's right in a way, because I think that part of it is, you know, one of the things we say is don't collect data you're not prepared to use. Like, for years, we were like, more data, literally tell us everything, give us everything. And now we're like, well, should we have that much data on our subscribers without their permission? So we're kind of balancing out what we're even collecting. But at the very least, don't collect data that you don't have a plan to use yet, because it makes a more friction-ish process, right? Similarly here, if you're going to have an email address, use it. Like, we got to figure out, if you got somebody that's, you've gone through lead nurture, you've gone through lapse lead nurture, you've gone through lapse lead nurture, and you haven't woken that person up, don't be afraid to clean out that person from your database, because that's going to turn into a spam trap at some point, and you're going to end up paying on the other side of it. So I think, yes, we shouldn't get bad email addresses, but sometimes the email addresses that we legitimately have go bad. And as long as we're emailing regularly, a bounce is sort of our key to know that that person is not good anymore. So if we kind of follow our own, if we eat our own dog food a little bit, as long as we're sending pretty consistently, we keep our list clean just by the nature of we've sent to everybody at least once in the last 30 days.
You know, and just on that bad data, when we're scoring something, because we were talking about scoring, I think once a score reaches a certain level, we should cap it until the data's been confirmed, right? That you can't go to an 8 or 9 until these, you know, in Dynamics, we could do that. We could say once this number field goes to 6, then these fields become mandatory.
Or if that number field goes to 6 in the first hour after you've sent an email, then you know something is wrong. Like, you know, I mean, you have bots that come in and just click on every link, And
Yeah.
that, from a lead scoring or contact scoring perspective, that can increase that number. And if it happens that quickly, then there's obviously something wrong.
Yeah.
So just something to keep in mind. Make sure you're looking at that data. I think it's, you can't just let it sit and not do anything with it.
So I would throw another question out to the audience, and maybe just reply in the chat or feel free to unmute. How many of you are doing a different field for lead score for engagement versus lead quality score, as in this title is good for me, this industry is good for me, whatever? Like we also at one point we're separating out what I would call like a traditional engagement-based lead score, which Emfluence has built right in because it's on the engagement side. And CRM side, we actually had like a lead grade, like this is an A lead for us because it fits all of our criteria. And Rick, that would be one where it's like, okay, but you can't be an A+ if the data is not validated. Like if it's not verified that this person's EBITDA is, $10 million, then maybe don't give them a really good score yet.
Right.
Is anybody doing that? Have you guys done anything like that?
I did that in my last role, but we combined everything together because we weren't using a system as good as Emfluence, unfortunately. And so we ended up having to have it all captured into one, and it didn't work well. And so having the ability to do multiple different lead scores on one contact record is super helpful, because again, you can look at it and say, okay, this person appears on paper to be a really great lead, but the reality is they're not engaging with us. So how good of a lead are they?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I could talk about data all day, but I want to, here's another thing, because as we're talking about this, I keep thinking about projects I've worked on. Another question I have when I go in and the system is not doing what it's supposed to do, I ask, who owns the CRM? And to now, CRM and marketing automation to me are the same things. Who owns this? Does the sales team own it? Does the marketing team own it? RevOps, do they own it? Like, who owns this? And then who's owns and who's responsible for the data? Now, organizations are starting to actually document this because, we're getting all these data breaches and things like that. But in many SMB type organizations, there's, that's sort of IT owns the data because it's part of information systems, or accounting owns the data. So I think once we start to have, questions about, what's the value of our data, we also have to have, who in the organization from a senior level owns data. And then I think we'll see a quality really take a jump.
That's a really great point, Rick.
Yeah.
Does
And I
anybody
think
want to
that
comment
also
about who owns the data in their organization?
Well,
this is a quiet group of marketers.
Well, somebody's working up the nerve to come off mute. We were working on that actively at Barclay. So I mentioned I was at Barclay through the end of the year last year. I'm out on my own now. So I guess I own the data because I'm the only person at the company. But the Barclay side of that was even, it had always lived with CRM. It had always lived with the CRM channel team, us working with our clients' first party data. We had our own developers. We had our own specialists that were trained in the systems that were CRM specific. And it wasn't until we had somebody come into the IT team or the IS team that had experience owning that in the past that there was even a discussion about it, because nobody in the my laptop is broken IT team even wanted to deal with this. And so they weren't used to thinking of it that way. But it was so obvious when we really got a chief information officer, somebody who'd really thought about it in more of a global, how does our agency handle data for our 100 clients, our 100 big clients with all their millions of contacts, and how do we handle the security and privacy and access to that data as an agency or as a company as well. It really started moving into that technical team. And so I still remember being on email threads with our legal team where our legal team was asking me what counted as GDPR compliant. And I was like, just for the record, I don't feel comfortable with this at all, but this is how this is something I'm following. And this is how I would say my interpretation of the law is and kind of where the industry is going. We should hire a lawyer. But also I kind of became that consulted voice in a RACI. Like I became one of those people that could weigh in on that. So I didn't lose control over that entirely. But from an almost DevOps perspective, we did end up building out a team under the technical side that ended up handling a lot of that, or owning or housing a lot of that, even if we still did a lot of the strategic segmentation or moving that data, transforming that data, that still happened a lot on our team.
Tiffany, any tips for someone in content marketing / production, how to integrate data CRM into our practices on a very basic level, just to start thinking about the customer journey more? Jess, do you want to start?
Sure. So for some reason, the chat questions only give me 4 lines and then I get nothing. So I'm glad you read that one. How do we integrate data and CRM into the overarching content strategy and how that aligns with the customer journey?
Mm-hmm.
So I think of that as it's probably part of your content process now that you figure out what the channel is at each stage of the process. Meaning, when somebody's at the beginning of the funnel, we're probably more of an advertising, social media, brand exposure. When somebody's in the middle of the funnel, we're probably more to hand raising part of the channel mix. And then when somebody's purchasing or repurchasing or giving us a referral or a great review, that's almost entirely owned. And I would say that that's really heavy on the CRM side. So once you've kind of got like where we should be talking to people along that customer journey, then specifically getting into, all right, at the beginning, we're in paid Facebook and Google ads or whatever. And then when we capture data, this is the right moment where we have enough value to exchange in that buyer or shopper's journey that they would give us some sort of identifying information like an opt-in, like an email address. So that's typically how I would lay it out, is kind of figure out where you're meeting your customer along that journey now, and then kind of figure out what that threshold is where it feels like it's worth it for them to give you contact information in exchange for you being super relevant and supportive of the rest of their customer journey. Then as far as, you know, if you count the customer as part of the customer journey, getting somebody in the system, welcomed, onboarded with a new product or service or whatever it is, and then being part of that experience as a customer. I mean, again, I go back to the Winnebago example just because it's the one that we've been using, but they have a 13-month onboarding program. So when you become an owner of a Winnebago, we sort of teach you about being a Winnebago owner over the course of your first year. We ask you about trips you've taken. We ask you to share on social media, just sort of following that really organically. But all of that journey lives in email marketing. All of that journey lives in that one-to-one channel because it's so based on timing. It's so based on that purchase date that really there aren't other channels that make sense for me there.
Yep.
Thanks, Mike.
And thanks, Mike, for joining us. Tiffany, the other thing is Emfluence has a customer journey worksheet and a customer journey workbook. And the worksheet's really going to outline, and I'll post those links for you in the chat. The worksheet will really outline what are those channels or what are the pieces of content that are being consumed at each of the different stages of the journey. And then the workbook actually includes the worksheet, but it'll also walk you through all the stages of mapping all of the entire customer journey for one of your lead sources, which you then can just replicate for all of your other lead sources, which is a huge project. And that's one of the things I talk about on a regular basis. So I'll post both of those. Yeah, it is. And it's super popular on the Microsoft Dynamics World website as well. So I'll post both of those in the chat for you, but thank you so much for your question. Does anybody else have anything? We've got 3 minutes left here.
I think we'll give everybody the bathroom break they've been craving all day.
Yeah, exactly. So there's the workbook, and here is the worksheet for you, Tiffany, in the chat. And on that, it looks like we don't have any more raised hands. So everyone have a fantastic Wednesday. So glad you were able to join us. We will be having a meetup in person if you're at DynamicsCon Live. Details to come, but we'll post some more information about that. And then I believe we're having another session in June, and I think I'm going to be diving more into the customer journey on that session, if I recall correctly. I don't have my calendar in front of me. We will see you all soon, and there will be a recording in the meetup, and Liz mentioned in the chat. So we will, you'll have access to that as well. Thank you all again. Have a great Wednesday and enjoy your bio break before your next meeting. Thanks, Jess.
Thanks for coming, guys. Appreciate it, Monica.
Bye-bye.
Bye.